I was nowhere and everywhere. That's like a song, I'm nowhere and everywhere, baby, but that's what it felt like. My father was there, and the enormity of the love and the healing and the support that he gave me was incredible. And I could sense that there were other beings round about him, but the thing was very much a special shared moment between my father and myself to prove that death really doesn't exist.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
I'm here with Jane Dawson. She's a psychic medium, spiritual guide, and a near-death experiencer. And she had her NDE while giving birth to her child. Hello, Jane. How are you?
Hey, AJ. I'm great, thanks.
I'd like to go back in time and talk about that day when you were giving birth. What happened?
To be honest, AJ, my life was pretty messy. I wasn't a happy woman. I had a lot going on, and I had an extreme lack of self-love. And that coloured my life, coloured my thoughts, coloured my relationships, coloured my choices. I had gotten together with a new partner, and I had two girls who were just approaching teenage years. And virtually as soon as I got with this new man, I got pregnant. And I actually lived next door to my mum and dad. I'd built a house like in their garden, and my new partner was living there, and my mum and dad were next door. And my dad had been through a cancer journey, lung cancer, and he'd had half a lung removed. Well, at the beginning of my pregnancy, we discovered that the cancer was back, and this time it was terminal. And it was very aggressive this time. And my father was a big man. He was 6'2". He was a Glasgow policeman, or police as we say here, and he was a publican. And I saw that man crying with fear and pain as his lungs filled full of his own fluid. He was literally drowning in his own fluid. And the doctors could do nothing to help, because everything they could do would suppress his breathing. So I discovered that there was a colleague at work, and I worked for the government at this time, and he was doing this newfangled healing thing called Reiki. Except, of course, it wasn't that newfangled, but it was newfangled to me. So I asked him if he would be kind enough to teach me Reiki, and he agreed to do that. So when I was about 10 weeks pregnant with my child, I went along and I was inducted into Reiki healing. And the weird thing was, I could feel this tiny embryo moving within my belly weeks before I should have been able to. And I thought, wow, this is strong stuff. And so after that, I went to my father and I said to him, I've just learned this thing called Reiki. Can I practice on you? And he says, yeah, anything that can help. Of course, at that time, I thought that healing meant purely healing the physical body. I was not aware of the nuances of healing or really anything about spirituality at that juncture. So anyway, my father could not sleep because of this issue with the fluid in his lungs. So he was sat in a chair, and I stood behind him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I asked for the Reiki healing to be sent. And after 5 minutes, he went so quiet. I thought something really awful had happened. But I sneaked a look around the front of his chair, only to discover that he was fast asleep, something that had eluded him for so long. I was peacefully sleeping. So, of course, my father's disease rapidly advanced as my pregnancy advanced. And I didn't tell him that I was having a boy, even when I found out, because then I believed when you died, you were dead, and your body went into the ground, or you were burned in a fire or whatever. But certainly I did not have the knowledge about anything else. Although I did have a burning interest in it from about the age 10, which was extinguished by life getting in the way. However, back to my father. So when I was about 6 months pregnant, my father was in hospital, And we got the call, you better come now, your dad's going to pass. And I made my way up to the hospital, myself, my bump, and my partner at the time. And the family were gathered around my dad, and I could see the heart monitor doing this. I thought, oh my God, my dad's going to die. It just hit me so hard. And so I sat down beside him and I held his hand and I whispered in his ear, Dad, I'm having a boy. I want you to always look after him for me. And he didn't hear, not with his ears anyway, because he was already deeply in a coma. So about an hour later, my father passed. And of course, that was devastating to the family, especially my mum, who was living next door to me, and the whole family. And really, I would say I was in a state of depression with everything that was going on in my life, as well as that. And I was very pregnant, and there was nothing, no treatment, no self-help I seemed to be able to apply, which would help me. So about 3 months later, I am admitted to hospital. My waters broke. I was admitted to hospital to await the birth of my son. So that takes us up to nearly when my near-death experience, as I call it, happened. So I was in the delivery ward. I'd been in the hospital already for about 2 days, and nothing much had happened. And all of a sudden, this pain just grabbed me, a really, really intense labour pain. And I was walking along. They used to make us walk along to the labour room in those days. This is 24 years ago. And things were quite prehistoric in Scotland then. But anyway, and I was just, I grabbed the wall and I was just, I was in so much pain. I knew this baby was coming because this was baby number 3 for me. And it was a later baby. There was a long gap. And as I say, it was a new partner and there was so much stress in my life. I was basically physically, mentally, emotionally and spiritually done. So anyway, I get along to the labour room and the delivery suite, and I'm lying there labouring away, and the anaesthetist comes in and asks if I would like a spinal block, and I said, no, you're too late. I'm about to have this baby. Of course, I didn't have the baby, and I was soon in a real lot of pain with transitional labour pains, and those are the type for any woman that's had a child without pain relief, where you feel that your body is actually going to split in two. It's incredibly painful. Well, the contractions push the baby out and all your body opens up to allow that to happen. And I asked for the anaesthetist to come back. No way, he was too busy with other patients. So as this process went on, I just felt, I can't do this. I cannot cope. I cannot deal with one more contraction. I just can't go on. I'm just going to leave now. I really had that thought in my head. I'm finished now. And it makes me, the whole thing makes me feel so emotional because this was a much loved baby. I knew it was a son, already had 2 daughters. But I just basically had lost the will to live during this pregnancy. And so all of a sudden, I was laying there awaiting the next contraction, and I just went into this beautiful state of bliss. Everything disappeared, all the noise round about me, all the monitoring systems, the pain disappeared, and I just, that literally to myself, I said, this is heaven. And as soon as I entered that state of being, I met with my darling father, and I was, oh my Dad, you're here. I could not believe it, because although I had asked him to turn up, not to turn up, but to look after my son, the last thing I was thinking about was my father. The only thing I was thinking about is get this baby out of me and let me basically slip away quietly. So my father was there, and the enormity of the love and the healing and the support that he gave me was incredible. And I could sense that there were other beings round about him, but the thing was very much a special shared moment between my father and myself. And as we were going through this, as we were sharing this, I could hear him in my mind saying, you know, you asked me to always look after your son, and here I am on what could be his most challenging journey ever, you know, exiting through the birth canal, a 4-inch long organ where all the child's bones get squashed together. And it was so intense. It was so beautiful, but it was short-lived in terms of some of your other near-death experiences. But what happened after it was super profound. So just at that, I could feel that the child was starting to leave my body to be born. And my father and my grandma and all the other beings around started to disperse, and I started to come back, not fully into this world, because the baby was born. And they asked me, the midwives asked me, can you hold your baby? Can you look at your baby? And I'm like, can you please just leave me in this state of bliss? So that was what happened at that time. But once I got the baby home, wow, the things that happened then. Because unknown to me, not knowing anything about spirituality at that juncture, when my father, from his perspective in the non-physical realms, in heaven, whatever you prefer to call it, could see my potential life path ahead of me, could see my son, his grandson's life path, had chosen, I believe, to reincarnate part of his soul into my son as to live another life with him. And interestingly, I said my father was a policeman. As soon as my son was age 3 or 4, he asked for handcuffs and a baton, which are, policeman things. And he always said, I want to be a policeman. And he is now studying to become a lawyer, which my father would have been super delighted to do because he held professional people in such high regard.
Can you describe that space where you were with your father? What did it look like? Where were you?
Well, I would say that I was nowhere and everywhere. That's like a song, I'm nowhere and everywhere, baby, but that's what it felt like. I was like, similar to the scene where you are, I wasn't, obviously my body was in hospital, but my father and I were just in this blissful place. And it was just like we were there together. There was darkness all around us, but the effort that he had made to come and to support me and to support my son and to ensure that I did not pass. I believe that was part of his thing. Did not pass, and that I came back to planet Earth, and that my son was successfully born, delivered. I feel that that was part of his mission, and that's why at that time, that experience did not last and was not as dramatic as some others when people have literally died. But he also was saving his energy for what was to come next. This had to happen. I feel it was like my father came in like an emergency service. This woman has got to stay on planet Earth, and this child has got to be born onto planet Earth. So it was not a choice. It was this is happening, and of course, from his perspective, he knew why this had to happen.
What happened when you came back? When you opened your eyes and looked around, what was going on?
It took me a long time. I was on my side. I was just still in a very blissful situation. The nursing staff, the midwives were concerned because I wasn't reacting like I should have been reacting. I didn't really even want to. This is terrible. It sounds terrible. I didn't want to interact with my child. I just wanted to stay in this blissful, pain-free place. So I believe they extended that that journey and non-physical. I was in my body, but they had worked with my energy so strongly that I was still floating there. Although the child had been born, they were giving me some time to come to terms with everything, and also give me healing while I was in that condition. So they were all flapping around and asking, was I okay, and all this kind of thing, and being concerned because I wasn't in the normal, I wasn't doing what normal would be expected from a new mom. I told my partner, I said, my dad was there. He said, where? I goes, everywhere. I said, were you not aware? He said, no, not at all. I said, oh, if he had been stood in front of me just now like my partner was in the physical, I would have known him this much. But I knew him, infinitely. And, it was his energy. It was a complete soul-to-soul meeting. Very shortly after that, very weird things started happening around the house. And one particular thing that happened was that my two children were home, my husband was home, my mother, who was deeply, deeply grieving, was home. Even the dog was there, and the baby was in my arms, and all of a sudden, the beautiful fragrance of flowers filled the entire room, not the entire room, the entire house. And I said to my daughters who were in their bedrooms, can you smell anything? They said, yeah, flowers. And I said to my mum, can you smell anything? Flowers, hubby, flowers. So I said, everybody come into the living room. And as soon as we all acknowledged it, it disappeared instantly. And I know that is one of the signs that spirit used to tell you they're around. And at that juncture, I shared with everyone, that was Dad. He came to me during the birth of the son, during the birth of my son. He helped Louis, my son, to come into this world. Now, my family were not believers at all. That's changed now drastically during my journey. But so many, honestly, things that science cannot explain happened when my father's energy did things in the physical realm in our house on planet Earth, miraculous things to prove that he was around. And I know that he's guiding me, looking after the child, also enjoying the journey, the new life journey, and also with my mom, a lot comforting her. Other things that happened were that one time I was in the house alone with my child. My child was sat on the dining table in a little car seat that we had at the time, and he was fast asleep. He was only weeks old. And I went in to make a drink, and I came back through, and the seat had been moved. There was no one else in the house, so I knew it was my dad had physically moved the seat to say, I've been to see your baby. He's great. He's fine. And that kind of thing went on so much. In fact, I used to be feeding my son. I used to be watching the TV and feeding my son. And there was only one medium. There was nothing really about spirituality. There was plenty about religion on terrestrial TV. But there was only one medium came on, and that was a chap called John Edwards, who you might have heard of. And I was sitting for hours every day, feeding, nursing with my son, and John Edward would be talking about those who have passed over, the signs they gave us, and then these signs would happen to me. They would happen around the house. Things would go missing and reappear. I would find coins in open-toed shoes. I could smell all sorts of interesting aromas, smoke around the house, all sorts of other things. And then, not long after that, because although that experience really illuminated me and really proved to me 1,000% that that something continued, a form of existence continued after physical death, which was a complete revelation and life changer for me. I had a miraculous healing from the deep depressive state I was in, and I do believe that was my father and the angelic realm coming together. And I was sat in my bed, and I'd been crying non-stop for about 4 days. I could not lift this depression. And eventually I cried out, "Someone help me, please." And it was as if a light switch had been flicked on. And immediately my mood normalised after 4 days of intense crying and not wanting to be here. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel normal. I feel calm. It's been so long since I'd felt like that. And what I did then, I got up and I made a cup of tea and went and joined my family, who were not used to seeing me at all because of this depressive state I was in. And that was the first time I encountered a miraculous healing. And now healings and miracles do happen around me all the time.
How did you end up becoming a medium?
Well, when I was 10 years old, I had this thought, what happens after we die? What happens after we die? And feel like I was born an adult. So I decided to go to a spiritualist church in the UK. And I was probably about this height, and I probably looked about 16 or 18. And so I go along to this spiritualist church, and it was dusty. And there was an older gentleman with grey hair and a grey suit. And I thought to myself, whatever this going on here, this is not answering my question. And then, due to life's ups and downs and my issues with self-loathing, which incidentally, my journey towards self-love and self-acceptance went hand in hand with this transformational near-birth, near-death spiritual experience. And that is one thing that I can't stress enough. Those two things coming together will change everything for you. So once that happened with my dad and I had my son home, I started to be really quite scared of the dark side. So this was another issue I was facing. But eventually I said to myself, I have got to find out more about this. This has happened for a reason other than the miraculous healing, the enlightenment, the self-love. There must be another reason. And coincidentally, at that time, my 14-year-old daughter was having she was doing some weird actions. She was burning bits of paper in the home and out in the garden. And I thought she was traumatized because of the birth of our brother. So I had a chat with her, and she told me that she was doing spells, and I was horrified. I said, "You're a witch? Oh no, we cannot have anything like that in here." And she explained to me, "Mum, it's Wiccan." And she was having all these spiritual experiences. And basically, her and I went on a journey together. But at that time, I thought I was in support of her. I didn't realise that all these amazing abilities would open up for myself. So we went down to an intuitive, a psychic course. So this was a couple of years later. And of course, she just flew. She just was fantastic at it. And I'm there scratching my head thinking, not sure I can do this. But of course, the bug had bitten me. The spirit world had got me. They and my dad knew I had a job to do if I wanted to take it up. So then I started studying with mediumship at the well-known Arthur Findlay College in the UK. I did several courses with them. And then I also took my daughter for her 21st birthday to study with the angels with a lady called Doreen Virtue, who was very, very big in the angels in those days. And eventually all this stuff came together. I decided I need to get this out into the world. When I was with Doreen Virtue, she used to come round with a microphone every morning saying, "I want to speak to someone I haven't spoken to yet." That was an American accent, apologies. And I used to say to my daughter, "Please don't let her come to me," because I was still really bad with the lack of self-love. And my daughter would say, "For goodness sake, that's what you're here and then she would just fly and give out these wonderful messages and healings. Eventually, yeah, I got to that stage with the passion that I had and the fact that people were responding very positively and I was making a difference in their lives. But one thing around me, it's generally been very subtle with me. So I have, I've had some experiences for sure, but generally, it's like it's a vibration. If you imagine it this way, the non-physical beings will send vibrations to us, and we, like, if you think of us like a sky dish, and then they come into our brain and they have to go through our human brain and come out as words that hopefully the other person understands to provide the evidence. My journey has continued though, because through my journey at Arthur Findlay College, I got to work in America, I got to hold workshops in France and Spain, Ireland, lots of places. And I know now that my journey is to be part of near-death experience work, because it is so, so important in the evidence that life exists after physical death. And also to enable people to have healings and enable people to have miracles, which are absolutely everyday events that happen to ordinary people. And I do believe that the NDE community is playing a massive part in the upliftment of planet Earth.
What would you tell someone who is afraid of dying?
Well, that used to be me, Jay. I used to be terribly scared of dying. I used to be very scared of the dark. I was very claustrophobic, very worried about going blind. So this could be like a past life thing, which of course is actually happening simultaneously. So I worried so much about that I ended up having a disastrous thing happen to my eye that basically cost me the sight in that eye. So I've learned a lot about spiritual laws, the law of attraction, which has massively added to what I was doing with my spiritual work. So I would say that death is merely stepping out of a body, stepping out of the physical earth, your earthly body, into the non-physical. And then when you feel like having another earthly journey, you step back into the physical, and so it goes on. The purpose of life is to experience contrast and still to feel love. And to understand, if you can, that we are all the same energy as God and the angels. Therefore, we can do or have anything that we want. And that is such a huge step up from many people, most people who still think you're born and you die and it doesn't matter what you think about. I want to tell people that they are so loved, that their thoughts are so important, that they are never alone, because I felt alone nearly all of my life, and I know so many people feel that. They're never alone. They're surrounded by loving beings, and your own soul loves you so much that you could never hate yourself or doubt yourself or feel any kind of way about yourself if you could comprehend that. Another thing which I believe is very important is that people need to laugh and have fun and take things lightly in this life. I felt very much worn down by responsibility nearly all of my life. And this is something that I've learned in recent years, and it's changed my life so much for the better. When you're light in your mood and your mind, you attract more light, and that just brings you closer, closer to spirit, closer to the light, and enables you to heal yourself, to heal situations in life, to heal relationships in life, and as I said, to really achieve anything that you want as long as you get out of your own way.
So you also wrote a book.
I wrote this book initially. It's called Be Your Own Medium, and I did sell copies all over the world. However, there was a publishing issue with it, so I have withdrawn it and I'm now revising it. into this new book that will be out soon. And that has some amazing experiences when, like, I've met, the story about my dad, and then through my mediumship, when I've met, like, do you remember the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher? She turned up at a mediumship event I was doing, and it was actually the day of her funeral. For younger listeners, ChatGPT her. She's a Prime Minister of the UK who was very disliked in Scotland for her policies. Anyway, I'd gone to this lady in the audience and I said, oh, Mrs. Thatcher's here. And the audience were terrible. They were catcalling and saying ding dong, the witch is dead, and all this kind of really horrible stuff. And I hadn't realised it was the day of her funeral. And I said to this lady, did you meet Mrs. Thatcher? And she goes, yes, I did. I described what she was wearing. I said, was that the same outfit she was wearing the day you met her? And she said, yes. And I said, and because Mrs. Thatcher, Margaret was giving me this information, I was much nicer than I thought she was going to be. And I really cared about people. And so I gave her this information. The lady agreed to all of that. And then Mrs. Thatcher said to me, I've brought her father through. And the lady's father came through and told the lady, and subsequently found out the two daughters, that the father said, I know exactly what's going on in your life with your husband, and I want you to know I'm right behind you. And at half time, the family came up and said that the husband had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So that was an incredible story. And later on, when I sent a thought to Mrs. Thatcher, because that is all we have to do to connect with spirit, we only have to send a thought. I said, why did you choose to come to this event on the day of your funeral? And she said to me, I wanted to see if it was possible to communicate with this planet after you pass. So that was a really, really, and that's only one of the amazing things that happened to me. I was telling this story in New Jersey. One time I was working there, and this audience member put her hand up and she said, who does Mrs. Thatcher spend time with now? And I felt like saying, how should I know? But in my mind came Churchill. So I said, well, she spends it with Churchill, apparently. Because, all these leaders, whether we thought they were good or bad, wicked, when they go to spirit, of course, they are a force for good. If they always were a force for good, then that becomes times 10, times 1,000. And of course, they influence the leaders today as well. But I even had like some real people, real bad people who I thought, I cannot put you in the book, even if you're saying, here's what I know since I've passed. So it was an amazing experience. So that opened me up to the fact that we can connect with any being we wish to, if they wish to connect with us. And there's a great drive from the other side of life to prove that death really doesn't exist and that we are these wonderful spiritual beings.
How can people contact you?
I have my website, janedawson.co.uk. I'm currently upgrading that to reflect all my new work with like miracles and super healing and my super interest in the NDEs, but that should be up shortly. I also have a presence on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Insta, all your favourite social media channels, and they're mostly under Jane Dawson. So people are very, very welcome to find me there. I do lives on a regular basis where I give healing, and you don't need to be in the same physical vicinity as someone to provide healing. That's just not a requirement. And I can give inspiration, guidance, readings, whatever people want. The spirit world's there. Do you know the spirit world knows exactly who's going to watch this podcast and when? Whether it's 3 weeks or 30 years from now, they already know. So what we are speaking about and what you speak about with your other guests will be tailored for the audience that will watch this, and that thrills me no end. No end.
Hi, I'm Janet Riley, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And I am thrilled to invite you to join us at our annual conference, August 27th to the 31st in Oak Brook, Illinois, just outside Chicago, where we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the field of near-death studies. Join us for 4 inspiring days with more than 100 speakers, including the legendary Life After Life author Raymond Moody, University of Virginia Professor Emeritus Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell of the Telepathy Tapes, the psychic lawyer Mark Anthony, and spiritual teacher Carolyn Mace, among others. You'll experience healing workshops, including meditation, Reiki, spiritual counseling, and our beloved bookstore with exclusive book signings, surrounded by others who share your interests and your experiences. Come make friends and become part of a warm, caring community that will beckon you to return. Every year, we welcome nearly 1,000 attendees and serve over 20,000 globally through educational resources and support groups. This warm, deeply connected community celebrates life and the life that follows. For nearly 50 years, IANS has represented researchers who study near-death experiences and supported those who have had near-death experiences and experienced related phenomena. Our mission is to educate the world. Our hope is that by supporting research and people, and by communicating far and wide to reporters, podcasters, and through our website and social media, we can normalize discussions about death and the afterlife and help answer the very important question: what happens when we die? Our planet faces unprecedented challenges, and our conference offers a place to recharge, to be informed, to be healed and inspired. Register now at ians.org, that's IANDS.org, and become part of a gathering that informs, heals, and inspires. We hope to see you there.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.